So yesterday I did, well, you may not be watching these in order, but previous to this video I did a, ramble through a loose ramble, I guess I would say, through the history of what I call Cartomancy style decks, which some people would label as fortune-telling style decks that emerged from a union between playing cards and fortune books, and sort of kind of merged together into a really cool subsection of Cartomancy. So that was really a ramble, but I didn't really highlight my favorites and or how would I use those, and why would I choose those. So I thought I'd do this second video and just kind of pulled out the ones that I actually use a lot, and why I like them, and just a couple different ways in which I use these, what this looks like versus maybe what reading with tarot or obviously a casting system is going to look very different. So these are kind of in a little bit of an order in terms of playing cards, into Sybilla, into Lenormand, into Kippur. I go a little more modern than, I go a lot more modern than into, I tend to love to have and look through the old fortune-telling decks, such as the Gypsy Witch and these types of that genre, but I don't always love the artwork and things of that nature, because it does feel sometimes, especially when you get into fortune-telling cards, it can feel dated, but not in a not in a positive way, such as the orange box Gypsy Witch fortune cards, which to me are probably the worst offenders. So I picked my two, what I consider to be that kind of fortune-telling style decks that I absolutely love. I also didn't talk about it yesterday, well, I mentioned it, but I actually think that the Mildred Payne is a great example of this melding of style of decks. Maybe Lenormand would certainly fall actually into this category, because it uses has the Lenormand, but it uses the other historical cards that you do see in those fortune-telling decks, such as the pig and the handshake and the eye and these types of things, that they're repeating symbols that would show up. So this is an excellent, so is the Robert Place one, which I love. It's a hard, to me those two are on equal footing. I love them both. I probably use this one the most because I just love the artwork. And then these more, where this is starting to cross over into what I would say is a little bit more towards Oracle, but it still has a very Cartomancy, again, in my definition of Cartomancy, it still has that feeling. And then this newest edition, which is one of my favorite, this just thrills my soul. And of course, now that I'm sitting down to film a video, it sounds like they're going to start mowing, because this is just what happens all of the time. We'll see. So I've made videos about playing cards. I think I actually have a video about Sybilla. This is probably the one that I use the least. I have a lot of Sybilla decks, and I really love them. This is my favorite. Again, I showed you the Il Menegalo version of it, but these are the same artworks, and this is the one that I actually use. I do wish that they used this artwork, which I really love, but still had the English on here, which of course I could write onto here if I wanted to, and a lot of them are obvious, right? Such as casa, as house, or you can look at what's going on, the conversation. Some of these you can really, the letter, right? Amore, for love. I'm guessing this is probably the living room. But Sybilla is one that I enjoy. It's one that I do for myself most often. I do find it probably the sassiest, and other people have said the same thing, so I don't think it's just my perception of it, but it could be. But there is just something tongue-in-cheek, sassy, call you out to, it takes what is in there in Kippur, is in there a little bit in Lenormand, but for me it's extra in there for Sybilla, and it's what I love about it. But I tend to just use that for me because I'm not going to get so sassy and with my clients. And I don't use the system enough that I would use that with clients. So that's probably the one that I use actually the least amount of all of these. But, you know, these, I think these, I'm not going to really go much into these. I've made videos, I've made videos about Kippur. I've done a ton of videos about Lenormand. I know I've made Oracle or Sybilla and playing card deck, so I'm not, or video, so I'm not going to overly go into how I use these. I think if you watch my channel, that should be pretty apparent. Again, these I use all of the time, but we're starting to see a little bit more Kippur, but you know, it's not in the place that Lenormand certainly is at now. So I tend to use the Fin de Siècle Kippur by Curie Oracle. I don't prefer this size. However, because I use the counting method versus a grand tableau, this works okay. You know, I'm really waiting for that perfect Kippur deck to come out that I love aesthetically, and that is the playing card size. So this stays on my table because I use that for Kippur. The 1889 Lenormand, again, I've talked about all of these. I have this small version on my table because that way I don't have to take everything down. Other than my own, obviously my own Lenormand deck, which I use a lot, this is probably my most used Lenormand deck. So I love the 1889. I have a lot of playing card favorites. I have actually 7 of my favorites over here. Right, so that changes. It's like tarot decks, right? I have a lot of playing cards, so I'll just be in a particular mood for a particular deck. So that will change. But right now, I'm absolutely loving this because it's just so bold and it's so obvious. Like the color, the black and the white, or black and the white, the red and the black are just quite obvious, and it's quirky, but not to where it takes away from what the card is. It's just right now my current reigning favorite, which, you know, could change. I change these a lot, but this is definitely a current favorite. So that brings us to, now yes, I'm just pausing to think. I have videos on all of these decks, so you can Google the name of it, or I mean, if you go to my page or my YouTube, you can easily find all of these videos. So I'm not going to go into a review of these, other than the fact that I do love them all. This is the one that I've had the longest as we've talked, so let's just kind of go through some of these. And just, this is for me not about a review so much as how would I choose to use these and why. So the Manaman for me, as I said before, is just about pure magic. I literally can embrace that feeling of being in a tented area at a fair or a festival with my, you know, crystal ball and all of the, what I think people would kind of roll their eyes at, maybe the tropes of fortune telling, but this taps into that because there's something wonderful and magical about those things as well. And this for me makes me feel embrace the magical in terms of divination, but it is also a really well-functioning deck. So I have used this, and this, I don't say this often for Oracle style decks. That's why I really don't consider this to be an Oracle. In the sense of the word, of the larger card, pull a daily Oracle, pull 3 cards for an Oracle reading. That tends to be how I use that more modern sense of Oracle cards. This doesn't really fit in that way. This works. So, you know, when I do a general reading, I've done a general reading with this, right, where I do, you know, this is my version of the Celtic Cross, which I have, again, I have videos on this. But I can, because of the way that this is set up as being closer to tarot-like, closer to a system, more less like supportive and affirmative and more let's get down and get some information. It works well in any kind of tarot spread that you might use. And that's not the case with what I would consider modern oracle decks, such as decks that I love, like the Spirit of the Animal Oracle. I would never do a full reading like this with the Spirit of the Animal Oracle. I would pull 1 to 3 cards for that. Same thing, and again, there are exceptions, such as the Shaman's Oracle and things like that. So there are exceptions in there. There's a huge market for the large card. Pull a card at the end of your reading, or pull 3 cards for the reading, a support style, affirmative style, oracle decks, and then there is a subset of modern oracle decks that lean more towards the system, which such as this, and I would also say this for sure, the Tarot Reflects, of Reflections, I would be what it would be, that can function on their own as a really well-rounded let's get information. Now you can use this in a supportive way as well, but it has the qualities that for me would allow this, and I have used this in a full reading spread such as this. So it's one of the things that I really enjoy about this, and why, even though it's not playing card size, for me this functions very much as cartomancy. Again, my version, my meaning of the word cartomancy, which is more related to playing card divination. I have to keep saying that. I know people are like, you said that a million times, but again, as I said last time, cartomancy means really anything that you're using cards with. So I would consider myself, in general, a cartomancer, because I read a lot of different things with cards, right? But in my own world, cartomancy is that little bit of a subset. This also reads, this comes up for me a lot, which is awesome because I love the word, but this also works really well as a 3 card. I'm prone to sets of 3s and things. I do it with casting, I do it with cards. I'm really a big fan of the 3 card pull. I don't tend to pull even number cards unless I'm doing a elemental spread. It's also great for like a 3 card reading, and then a do this, don't do this, right? Let your intentions known. But it's interesting because this is the key that says there are things that can be unopened, but maybe right now is not the time to open the door. Right now it's setting up your intentions and working on being clear about what your voice is. But right now is not actually time to open the door. I love do and don't. That's one of my favorite things. And so, you can do this 3 card reading and then get an actionable piece of advice. This is all things that I've talked about, that you've seen me work with, but that tends to be the way. Now, could you use this for a 9 card? Yes, there's no question. I'm just trying to get other cards to show up. You could definitely use this for a 9 card. I don't tend to be honest. I tend to use it as in my general spread. 6 cards, also something that I do. You get a great variety here of as above, so below. What's going on, but here's the main thing, what's going on beneath the surface, or here's the main row and what's going on above that you, with a little bit of perspective, what information can you get. You can also do a lot of zigzaggy things like you can with Lenormand. So I'm also a big fan of the 6 card, but you could take this definitely into the 9 card. And there's just so much that you can do. I have a whole video on the glory of the 9 card, and this is, and I would say all of the decks that I'm talking about right now work for this, and this is what for me sets them apart from what I would call a modern oracle deck, because I simply wouldn't take I'm just looking at like the Goddess Oracle. I personally wouldn't do a 9 card with the Goddess Oracle. Number one, the cards are large and it just isn't feasible to do a 9 card in a reading space for me. And number two, there are often deeper underlying issues or addressing these sort of deep resonant areas that you don't really need 9 of those on the table at the same time. It's going to get really difficult to get a clear message. Whereas these types of decks are really meant for getting clear, concise messages. This, again, I had sort of put together with, because I think these are similar in many ways, but oh, do I love this deck. So again, this is the Witchwood Oracle Fortune cards. See, they're even called fortune cards. A simple archetypal guide to your future and fortune. I love this one because they fully embrace the whole fortune telling aspect. It was packaged really wonderfully. It had one of those magic fish that just tickled my soul packaged with it. So they really embraced the legacy of this style of reading. The only thing that I would love about this is if there were more cards. Now, of course, these are different card stocks. I believe there are 44 cards here, and in this deck there are, well, there's 32. So that's, you know, there's a lot of 32 card decks. So it's similar to Lenormand. So, you know, this is, I think, I'm just mourning. I just love this so much that anything more I would love. So again, the same way I would read this, I would definitely read this in a 3 card, right? Luck is at hand, but beware the rat, right? Beware what's going to be stealing away from that. What is going to take away from your good fortune that is at hand, something that is ready for you to take hold of. But you've got to be wary of those little things. I don't know why I'm going over here to the side so much. Apologize. You know, be careful, because there are a lot of little things that can eat away and gnaw away at what you're attempting to do. And then maybe a do and a don't do, right? What do you want to do? Okay, hold your power in your hand. Grab hold of your wand. Be the master of your own fate. And what not to do. Now, I like snakes, and I really like snakes in fortune-telling decks. I think of them as rebirth. I definitely think of them as transformative but complicated, right? So there is a degree of complication to the snake. And so that was one of the things that I guess I would, so not all fortune-telling decks see snakes in a good light. Let's see what this one does. I just read this whole deck my own way, but let's look. Seduction, temptation. So a lot of these will harken back to the Garden of Eden, right? So you, of course, have the snake tempting poor Eve into taking the apple, who then turns around and talks Adam into doing it. And there's this whole, you know, snowball effect of temptation and getting people to do things. So it's not a particular trope that I tend to fall into with snakes, but it is there, and it's certainly an archetype now of the snake, giving how influential the Christian landscape and of archetypes is in our cultures, at least certainly here in the United States. But I tend to see it as hard to grasp, a little bit wiggly, and the coils are twisty and turny. You don't quite know where you stand with it, but it's moving towards transformation. So in this case, I would say grab hold of things, and again, it mirrors what's not to do. Don't get caught up in the complications and the issues there. Don't get tripped up by the moving and shifting landscape of what's going on around you. So this is a great way to use any of the decks that I'm using, is do a 3 card, do or don't do, don't do. And then again, you could definitely do, you know, a 9 card with this. One of the things that I love about many fortune-telling style decks, many Cartomancy style decks that came out of even the Lenormand style, is that they often have significator cards like the Lord and the Lady, or the Man and the Woman, that you can use. And so that's really fun, because you can, much like with Lenormand, shuffle, 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 then go through the deck and find the lady or the man or whoever it is you. You represents you or your client, and see, okay, well, what are the cards on either side? Well, here we have the Witch and the Owl, right? Wisdom is wonderful, and we want to gather up wisdom, but for me, the Witch is about practice. So I don't know what they have here. Let's just be fair and take a look. this is 31. The Witch is about inspiration, moderation, and courage in this particular deck. I think of the Witch as somebody who is a practitioner, somebody who is actually doing things, crafting things. And so we're taking head knowledge and wisdom and these types of things and then physically crafting and practicing. It's the embodies practice in my head. So this is really beautiful, right? Because this speaks of having both sides. You don't want to practice without wisdom. Probably not smart. You don't want to do workings and do practices and do craft your practice without wisdom. But at the same time, a whole bunch of wisdom without actually using that and having that be part of your daily walk. What's the point of that, right? You just got a bunch of knowledge and wisdom in your head and you're not using it in a practical way. So I love that. That's a fantastic message. Thank you to the Witchwood Oracle. I'm trying to make this not as long as the last one, so I'm going to keep moving along. Same thing, all that I just said can be said for this beautiful deck. Which is the L'Oracle des Reflets, or the Oracle of Reflections by Celia Melville. This is, A, the cardstock is stunning. B, the artwork is stunning. Again, I have a video on this. For me, the only criticism would be that it's a little bit dark here. So we have black text on sort of a dark brown background. And again, with the eyesight issue, which I know you all get tired of hearing. But I do think as deck creators, if the font had been lighter or this plate had been this light color, it would pop and it makes it a lot easier to be able to read. And that, especially when it's fancy little fonts and things, it gets a little bit difficult to read. And that is important if if you're going to be using a deck and not just collecting a deck. That is important. But I love this deck to pieces. It shuffles like an absolute dream. This, again, also has a significator cards in it, so it does have a male and female that you can find. And I do this often with this deck where I will find myself and then look at the cards on either side. And look at that fox. Oh, I love that fox. Look at the mountain. Everything I've just said about all of the other decks are the same. This is an amazing for a 3-card pull. Here we have the mandala, we have family, and we have the shadow. And then love decks that have a serenity card. I mean, that's instantly going to be a favorite for me. And this is the fall. Do get serene, right? Do come into center. Don't, trip yourself up and don't just fall into things, but find your center, right? Love that. Love do's and don'ts. It's a great way to kind of see how a deck's going to work when you can look in that light and shadow. So this is beautiful. I love this deck. It's definitely in my favorites cubicle. I have a cubicle of favorite tarot decks and favorite Oracle style decks, and this is always in there. And it fits all of the properties that I just said about those 3 decks. These 3 are kind of similar together. Again, these are all 3 modern type decks, I think, that go with what I've been talking about. We didn't show the Mildred Payne. I have many videos on the Mildred Payne, from when it first came out to expansions to the fresh backing. I love this deck, and it definitely fits into the fortune-telling, Gypsy Witch, Lenormand and Kippur, Sybilla style decks, where we have simple symbols. I'm just going to turn it over this way. Simple symbols that you can build little tableaus. You could do like 3 rows of 4. And then, a cute little down here at the bottom here, and do a little tableau with it. Do your do and don't. Definitely 9 card. I read this very specifically in a web format, which I think, again, I did a video maybe at the end of this particular deck. But so I have a particular reading that I do with this, but it is that same concept of simple symbols. What does the key mean to us right now, right? It might have meant certain things to certain people in different time periods, but what does the tree mean? What does the key mean to us right now? And you can fall into these simple symbols to get clean, precise messages about. So there's a girl and a boy card, so you've got your significator cards. This is a lot. Like, this is the biggest one because he keeps adding on. I think well, there's 78. I can't remember what the total number of cards is anymore. So there's definitely getting a lot, and it gets very difficult. This is actually one, while I love the format because I love these small decks, this is one that I would love to see come out in a playing card size because I think it would be a great addition. So I need to message him. He puts out so many different editions. Maybe he would be, you know, willing to put out a playing card size edition. But I love that. Again, I talked about the maybe Lenormand. I think this is, and I've talked about this in the past, if you get, you know, if you're interested in Lenormand and you're interested in these types of decks, the maybe Lenormand is an amazing step into that because you have a very clear Lenormand deck. And you can pull out, they're numbered, you pull out 1 through 36 and there's a Lenormand deck. You also have a full playing card deck in the gorgeous card inserts at the top, so you have your playing cards there, and then it expands it to the 52 card, and it expands it, let me find some of them, it expands it in the traditional, like the handshake, the broken mirror. These are symbols that he pulled out from these decks. The theft card here, snake, the rapiers. These are all these are cards that you saw in these other decks and other fortune telling style decks of the time. And so this is just, or the pig is really, you see that all the time in these older style decks. The lion, the medal for like high honors. I love the lightning snap there. So yeah, so this is a great, it's a U.S. Games. You can pick it up on Amazon, at least in the United States. The backs are embrace the magical of the system. Any Lenormand style reading that you can do a grand tableau, you can do a 9 card, you can do runs, you know, sets of runs. You can definitely shake them up and or shuffle them up, find a significator, and pull 2 or 3 cards before and after. All of those things that we've talked about in a Lenormand videos that I have, you can do with this deck, but you've got a full complement of a lot of the symbols that were being used around the same time as Lenormand and after. So this is a great modern, easy to find, well, again, easy to find in the US deck to kind of dip your toes into that world. I love that deck. And then lastly, which I talked about yesterday, this is what I think is the really full circle, right? That's why I got so excited when I saw this, and so excited when I received this, and so excited when I did the review or walkthrough of it, is that this to me is that full circle where it comes back around to such a smart creation of going back to the beginning. And so you do have a full 52 card playing deck with jokers. There's the 2 jokers. So you have a full playing card deck. But then you also have and so it has its own game system to play with it, and then you also, of course, have this really amazing multi-layered divination system that is pulled in this as well, which I just think is phenomenal. I mostly use this in a 9 card, but again, any of the configurations, I say, again, all of these I probably mostly use either in a 9 card or definitely in a 3 card I mean, the images on this are amazing. And then a do and a don't do. This definitely leans towards a real, straddles that line, similar to the, I'm looking at it right now, the Curie Oracle. It definitely straddles a more oracular, a little bit more into spiritual depths. All of these can do the same. It's a pet peeve of mine that people will say, you know, Lenormand isn't something to use for spiritual questions. So not true. I can't, it's so unbelievably not true. You can do a Lenormand, and I've done many grand tableaus with Lenormands on spiritual issues alone, and you can provide an amazing in-depth reading with them, no question. So any of these systems can do that, but these sort of lean into a more what I would say a bit of a more modern idea of divination as sort of this more of a spiritual practice than some. I think the roots of cartomancy again were down in the dirt and the grime of everyday life. And this, with all of its gods and goddesses and things of that nature, and portals into other dimensions, has a depth feel to it. It's got an extra layer of depth about it that is really powerful. This is certainly for me, one of the best things that have come out of, is this 2019 or was this 2000? I think the Kickstarter was last year, but I don't know if I got it this year or last year. I can't remember. But this is to me like one of the greatest things for someone like me, as you saw with this video and the last video, that loves this style of divination and of reading. This to me is just it just tickles me pink, as they say, because it does feel very modern, but at the same time it feels very full circle into the intention and the beautiful juxtaposition of the game world with just the everyday objects that we use to sit down and play King's Corners or whatever we're playing, and the divination world, and really expresses that in a gorgeous package. So yeah, I'm a big fan. Obviously, I purchased these myself. I was not paid to say any of this, but this just tickles me every time I even look at it. That's how much I love this system, especially in this conversation that we're having, because it is so modern and so full circle at the same time. But this, I mostly use 9-card spread or the 3 plus the true, which, if you can see with all of these, that tends to be the way that I use these style of decks. There are exceptions, of course, with Lenormand. I mostly only do a grand tableau with Lenormand. That's my preferred grand tableau. I do sometimes with Kippur. Certainly Kippur is meant to be used that way as well. It's just me. Why do I pick up Kippur when I don't pick up Lenormand? It's because of that counting master method that I just love. So I tend to lean towards Kippur for that, and then lean towards Lenormand for a grand tableau. And the rest of these I tend to do 9 cards or the 3 plus 2, or just a 3-card pull, depending on what I'm doing. So there you go. I think this is probably now just as long as this first one, but I just wanted to talk a little bit less about the history of it and more about the use of it, and why I would pick this style deck up over Tarot Oracle. And for me, it's twofold. One is that it has a degree of, this just tickles my fancy. It literally does get me that, oh, I just love it so much. So it has that sort of wonderment. There is for me, a sense of wonderment around these types of systems, because it does tap into, for me, very much into that feeling of, I'm not in the drawing rooms of the Madrone family covered in draping gold, which is amazing, and I love those decks, but it just feels like I'm just a person, which I am, that's sitting at home and I have a deck of playing cards and I have questions and I grab what's nearby and I use it. I think that's at the heart of all divination, that we are human beings with questions, so many questions, and we reach out and we grab what's nearby to us and we use that to try to get those answers. And so there's something about these types of decks, at least their roots, that really speak to that. Let's just get in and do the work and get the answers that we're looking for. There's something quick, there's something practical, there's something also deep about them that I just love them. And so I wanted to sort of touch on that kind of aspect of these decks, where I don't think I was able to do that in the last video. So I'm going to stop rambling, and thank you for watching, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day.